Well, thank you, Anna. I am honored to be here. I know it is cold. It is chilly outside, but I think all of us feel warm in our hearts because of the occasion that brings us together. I've had the opportunity as the governor of this great state to participate in many important events in my 11 and a half years as governor and 4.5 years as lieutenant governor. But this is probably going to be, I think, one of the most memorable of all the occasions, all the events I've participated in today. Again, as I look at the challenge we have today, I'm reminded of an event I had a little over 7 years ago when we gathered together to commemorate and celebrate the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Most of us know of that speech. We lived through it. We appreciated the words and the message that it embodied. And when we observed that historic milestone a little over 7 years ago, this past August, I think there was a sense of optimism, a sense of hope, a sense of feeling like we've made some progress over this period of time, and we would yet have an opportunity to fulfill the dream that Martin Luther King talked about, particularly as he quoted the Declaration of Independence, where it says that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And sadly, yet, as we look at 2020 and the challenges that we faced in 2020, of which there are many, we still see that we have a long way to go. As Anna mentioned, the killing of George Floyd, other significant events that have happened this past year have, I think, reminded all of us that we have not gotten to the promised land yet. We're not where we should be. And we find out, unfortunately, that racism and bigotry still exist. George W. Bush said this, if I can find his quote here in my papers. My hands are a little bit frozen. In talking about the unrest that was happening in the country, the killing of George Floyd and other issues, he said, quote, he was disturbed by the injustice and fear that suffocated our country. He went on to say, many people doubt the justice of our country, and with good reason. Black people see the repeated violations of their rights without an urgent and adequate response from American institutions. That's from President George W. Bush. I think all of us understand the concern that we've seen exhibited, and all of us probably have concern about why. Why have we not done better? Across the nation, including here in Utah, this pricked our conscience and caused people to start questioning and talk about reform, and particularly reform of our justice system, our law enforcement agencies, our police. And it caused us to, I think, have introspection. I know for myself personally, I've had to think back and say, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? What am I missing here? And my responsibility as governor, as a citizen of these United States, as a parent, and have that self-introspection to ask those questions about why do we still have racism and injustice here in our country. It affects all of our lives. No matter what the color of your skin is, it impacts all of us. And in spite of the progress we've made, and we have made progress, we certainly don't want to acknowledge the progress that has been made. We have many that say we haven't made it fast enough. Some have said, we're doing fine. But as we look at the status quo, I can say myself, it's not good enough. Wherever we are on this spectrum, we can do better, and we should do better. And the need for this is undeniable. It's significantly important to us as a society to find ways, in fact, to root out bigotry and racism and make sure there's equality for one and all. That's why after this happened, and I asked the Division of Multicultural Affairs, the Multicultural Commission, and the Martin Luther King Jr. Human Rights Commission to convene an emergency, in fact, meeting last June with all the stakeholders from Black and African American communities to hear their perspective, to sit down and actually listen to see what we could learn and to understand better what some of the problems as they perceive them to be. Of course, police reform was at the top of the agenda of a many list of items we talked about that day. Governor-elect Spencer Cox was a part of that. We spent over, I think, 2.5 hours that first day, and then met again subsequent to that. And again, recognizing that we need to do things better than we've done them in the past. At that meeting, community members shared that they wanted to move beyond aspirational dialogues. We have those aspirational dialogues that we have all the time, and actually move to some kind of action where we actually change and do something. Do something that makes it better. Make something that advances our ideal of having a colorblind society. And as we talk about that, what does that mean for government? What does that mean to change our policies? What does it mean to help our fellow man change their hearts and minds, which is ultimately where we need to be? As many of you know, I committed at that time to go beyond just the conversation and actually to engage in policy review and practice and to take some tangible actions. And as many of you are aware, we've already taken some important actions. It's a step in the right direction. It's a start. For example, I signed into law the Utah legislature's bill that banned police chokeholds. Over the past 6 months, members of my administration, including cabinet-level members and staff, have undergone training to better understand racial injustice and the systemic nature of oppression. We've learned new terms like microaggression and what that means, that sometimes we inadvertently give offense when not meaning to give offense. This includes training that went beyond inclusion and diversity to explore the historical context of race and our relationships and how it intersects with housing, health care, education, criminal and juvenile justice systems, and the invisibility, sometimes we don't see it, of systematically marginalized identities, among other things that we talked about at the time and we're working on today. Still, this is only the beginning of the work that remains to be done to get us to where we ought to be. This is what I would like to call a new beginning, a new opportunity that really in many ways is provided to us because of 2020, a chance for us to in fact take stock of ourselves, have introspection. The COVID pandemic, for example, has shown us that, brought to light that we have shortages with our minority communities, our communities of color, when it comes to economic opportunity, to education, the cultural inequities that confront our Black, Latino, Asian, Pacific Islander, and Native American communities. And they exist. We all know that. And the question is, what are we going to do about it as a community? I would just make a couple of observations here in conclusion. We must act. We can't sit back and ignore the problem as if somehow it will magically go away. We need to be bold. We need to increase our dialogue with our communities of color. We need to have discussions and better understanding. Sometimes we need to listen so we can learn and understand before we can be understood. And we must do it now. There's no reason to put off. Again, we have an opportunity with this new beginning to start now anew. As Robert F. Kennedy said, every time we turn our heads the other way, when we see the law flouted, when we tolerate what we know to be wrong, when we close our eyes and ears to the corrupt because we are too busy or too frightened, when we fail to speak up and speak out, we strike a blow against freedom and decency and justice. The Utah Compact on Racial Equity, Diversion, and Inclusion that we are introducing today is aimed at accelerating our forward momentum in ending racism, promoting equality, and making our state more inclusive. I think we can set a good example to the rest of the country to follow as we do this, by the way. It's based on the following 5 principles and actions. I expect that our communications department will make sure you all have copies of this compact. Again, we did some good work with the Immigration Compact years ago. We think this is another way for us to raise the bar and step forward in a very positive way. The 5 principles and actions we have in this compact are: 1, acknowledgement and action. We must acknowledge that racism exists, and our actions do make a difference. We call out racism wherever we see it and take purposeful steps to stop it. 2, investment. We invest our time and our resources to create greater opportunity for people of color. Eliminating racial and ethnic disparities requires our significant effort and our investment. 3, public policies and listening. We advance solutions to racial ills by listening and creating policies to provide equal opportunity and access to education, employment, housing, and health care. 4, engagement. We engage to affect change. Broader engagement, equitable representation, and deeper connection across social, cultural, and racial lines will uphold the principle of nothing about us without us. Increased listening and dialogue is important as we engage. And last but not least, number 5, movement, not a moment. Utahns unite behind a common goal to create equal opportunity. We affirm our commitment that will not be just a passing moment, but a legacy movement of social, racial, and economic justice. We are all in. Let me give you one more quote here as I finish up. This is from President Ronald Reagan. I think it kind of is germane to our subject here today. A very proud American, proud of his heritage and what he was able to accomplish as a president. But he said this about all of us: we're blessed with the opportunity to stand for something, for liberty and freedom and fairness. And these are things worth devoting our lives to. This compact outlines things that we understand about freedom and liberty and fairness, equality. And there are things worth all of us standing up and doing something about. We need to be engaged. And these are worth devoting our lives toward for our fellow man, our fellow brothers and sisters, children of God, making us all brothers and sisters that we should fight for each other. While this compact represents another positive step forward in our ongoing effort to end racism and injustice and to achieve a more perfect and equitable union, I harbor no illusions about this being an easy journey, an easy task. It won't be short, it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worthwhile. And we can build momentum working together so we can accomplish the goal that's set for us and remember again of Dr. Martin Luther King's words. And as we renew our commitment to racial equality and social justice and continue to work together, his plea that we will one day live in a nation where we will not be judged by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character will be realized. That's my hope and my belief that it will happen here as we engage together. And I thank you for your attention today. And we have some great people here to speak to us and give us their perspective. So thank you very much. This is an important day in our history.
Thank you, Governor. Next, we will have the opportunity to hear from Dustin Jansen, the Division Director of Indian Affairs. He will be followed by Representative Sandra Hollins and Senator Jani Iwamoto. Thank you.
Well, hello and Yate. My name is Dustin Jansen. I serve as the Director of Indian Affairs for the state of Utah. And it's my pleasure to share a few remarks on today's topic. Wilma Mankiller, she was the first female president of the Cherokee Nation. She said, "Public perception creates public policy. How we see each other determines how we treat each other." And I feel like this compact is going to go a long way in helping us see each other differently, to see each other better, or as Governor Herbert said, to even see each other when we haven't been before. The compact points out that racism is more than just a character flaw of individuals. It is a system of ideas, beliefs, and practices, structures and policies that give some people greater opportunity than others. Unraveling centuries of racism requires anti-racist action and policies that need to go into effect now. It means being proactive in bettering our relationships with each other. It means actively being fair and just to one another. It means including the voices of minority communities at the table where decisions are being made, especially when those decisions affect their lives. I work with the Native communities and tribal governments in this state, and I feel like this compact is a great addition to the governor's executive order on tribal consultation. That executive order required state offices to develop a consultation procedure with tribes and to appoint a tribal liaison, all with the effort of bettering communication with tribal governments, tribal communities, and getting their input. If decisions will affect tribal government and Native communities, meaningful consultation must happen. If it concerns tribal governments and communities, Native communities must be invited to the conversation. As stated in the compact, nothing about us without us. We must all look at our personal, our professional, and our political practices and ask how we can do better. And I believe that this compact will help us understand how we can. I echo the compact's final principle that we can do this. We can make this a movement rather than a moment, that we can, as Wilma Mankiller hopes, we can begin to see each other and see each other better so that we can treat each other better, so that all citizens of Utah can live together in a good way. Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is a good day. This is a wonderful day. Today I stand before you as Utah State Representative Sandra Hollins, the representative for District 23, one of the most diverse communities in the state of Utah. I have a lot of cultural and just a very rich community. But today I also stand before you as a wife of a black man who have sat up late nights wondering where he is when he is not at home, because I know his skin color could be a trigger for some in our community. I stand before you as a mother of two daughters who she proudly raised in this community, but who had when they were very young, had to explain to them racism. I stand before you as a black woman who have experienced racism in this community. But today I stand before you with hope. I stand before you with hope that a state that this past election cycle stated that slavery should no longer be a part of our Constitution, that this state is ready to now take a step forward in that next process and said, we are ready to start dismantling systematic racism and other isms in our communities, that everyone in our community should be treated equal. I stand before you as a legislator who have been working along with my other colleagues of color for years, long before we were elected. We have been working on these issues. And I'm proud to see that now we have allies and other people who have come on board, some of my colleagues in the House and Senate who have come on board and said, we understand. We're now ready to start working on this. Tell us how we can be an ally and tell us what we need to do. This compact is the first step, and I'm excited to see that the state of Utah is ready to lead out in this in the United States and to say, We need to do something. It is now time that we make sure that everyone is welcome in our community. It is time that wives are no longer laying in their bed at night wondering if their husband's going to come home because of their skin color. It is time that mothers stop worrying about their kids, having to explain racism to their kids at a young age. And it is time that women of color in our community have the same access as everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Herbert, for including me today. It was on November 11th in 2010 that I stood here waiting in line to sign the Utah Compact, urging Utah leaders to stand by guiding principles which address the complex, urgent challenges associated with our broken national immigration system. I was a new member of the Salt Lake County Council, and as the first Asian American woman to be elected to office in Utah, and as a grandchild of immigrants, the moment was not lost on me. Today is another day that our state, again standing together alongside those representing a myriad of communities, where we are banding together for the Utah Compact on racial equity, diversity, and inclusion, and affirming that all people are created equal, and that a racially equitable state requires us to act and create a society where race and ethnicity do not determine value, opportunity, or life outcomes. This compact acknowledges that racism exists and commits to take purposeful steps to stop it. The investment of time and resources will be used to eliminate racial and ethnic disparities, social, economic, and environmental. I represent my district, my state, my ethnic communities. I am Japanese American and part of the Asian American Pacific Islander community, a diverse population which has its origins in East Asia, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. In Martin Luther King's The World House, Reverend King says, "Our hope for creative living in this world house that we have inherited lies in our ability to reestablish the moral ends of our lives in personal character and social justice." One of my close mentors is retired Judge Raymond Uno, who has always had a clear vision and commitment to social justice. His dream is that all diverse groups be merged into the greater community, that their existence no longer necessary because racial and ethnic minorities will truly and unconditionally be accepted into our society. Today, during the most unbelievable and trying times in our state, country, and world, and alongside the most political partisan extremism and government rage many of us have ever experienced in our lifetime, this is a moment, another positive and compassionate Utah moment, where we stand as a state alongside our partners and say no to racial inequities, disparities, and unequal opportunities, and yes to a movement, collective and consciously, toward racial justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Next, we will hear from Scott Anderson, President and CEO of Zions Bank. He will be followed by Gail Miller, owner and chair of Larry H. Miller Group of Companies, and then Derek Miller, President and CEO of the Salt Lake Chamber.
This year has witnessed a long-needed national reckoning on race. This reckoning has produced tensions that have boiled over into protests and riots that we haven't seen since the 1960s. There is a recognition that systemic racism is a problem in our country and in our state. It's not just a problem, though, that policymakers and law enforcement must address. It is something that we, as businesses, religious organizations, educational institutions, nonprofits, and yes, we as private citizens must address and strive to improve. We have had our protests, and now is the time to take action, to stamp out social injustice, to erase bigotry, and to have our community one of inclusion and equity. I was touched by the testimony earlier this summer of one of my colleagues, Angela Underwood Jacobs, who testified before Congress on police reform. Angela is a regional manager and a senior vice president for our affiliate in California. She was the first African American that was elected to the city council in Lancaster, California, and she's also a former congressional candidate. Angela's brother, David Patrick Underwood, was an employee of the Department of Homeland Security, and during one of the riots in Oakland, he was shot multiple times and left to die on the sidewalk. In Angela's emotional testimony and tribute to her brother before Congress, she said that there are certain things that we need to do as a country and as a community to reduce racial tensions and to improve the lives of all Americans. They are education, jobs, housing, health care. And then she said, we must listen more and we must learn from one another. I believe that these fundamental principles are key to ensuring that all Utahns have a truly equal opportunity to prosper and that economic inclusion is a reality for all. On behalf of Zions Bank, it's my honor to add our name to the signers of this Utah Compact on racial equality, diversity, and inclusion. We all need to be part of this solution by listening more, talking less, educating ourselves to understand other perspectives, and get up and do something. Governor, I applaud you and I honor you for leading out in the Utah way and bringing us together under this umbrella of principles that we all believe in. And I hope that this will catch fire and that this will lead a national movement that we can make our country truly equal under God. Thank you.
Governor Herbert and early signers, I really want to thank you for your leadership and your collaboration that's designed to ensure our state, our businesses, and our communities come together with the right course of action that's needed to create and promote equal opportunity for all. A few years ago, I stood on the floor of the arena and declared, "We are not a racist community." I feel inclined to apologize for that today. I have since learned that we are, and we need to face it. I'd like you to look at the people behind me, not just their signs, but their faces, recognizing that they are all different, as are we in the audience. Every gathering that we have should have this kind of diversity in it. We need to be able to include everyone. I am deeply concerned about the unraveling effects of racism and incivility, and I stand here today to say it can't be tolerated. Collectively, we need to do much better at listening, learning, understanding, acting, and advocating. If someone has an advocate, they have an opportunity. Utah can and must be a leader in becoming a place of unity, hope, and opportunity. We are here today to do our part and commit to the 5 principles outlined in the compact. And I invite everyone in Utah to join us, and hopefully it will spread across the nation. I am here to commit again. We are all in. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Derek Miller with the Salt Lake Chamber and Downtown Alliance. My message today is that the business community has an important role to play in diversity, inclusion, and equality of opportunity. Words and even the best of intentions will never be enough to accomplish what is necessary. We believe diversity and inclusion must be a way of doing business. We must commit to meaningful and sustained action. The Utah Compact on Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion is an important step along this path. Other steps on the path include listening to the experiences of those who have been affected by injustice and discrimination. Beyond listening, we must seek to validate, accept, and even to the extent possible internalize the inequities and injustices we hear. And we must recognize the fact that as individuals and as a society, we can do better. My hope today is that a commitment to diversity, inclusion, unity, kindness, and even love will become not just a way of doing business, but a way of life, especially in Utah. Over the past year, the business community has been working not only to better understand, but to act. Through roundtable discussions, webinars, symposiums, we're seeking to raise sensitivity and awareness concerning racism and working to promote anti-racist policies and processes. The Chamber is working with partners from across the state to develop a business best practices toolkit, and we look forward to hosting a major summit for businesses and employers in 2021 to deepen and strengthen the continued commitment to this critical effort. As we move forward, the Compact will be our guide, a working document with inspiring principles that can motivate and unite. I encourage businesses across the state of Utah to read the Compact at the Salt Lake Chamber website. By visiting slchamber.com, you can read it and you can add your name to it as a sign of your commitment and the commitment of your business to be part of this movement. I'm confident we can make a difference. Together, we can ensure that Utah remains not only the best place to work, but the most wonderful and peaceful place in the world to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. I'd like to draw your attention to the wonderful group of partners and advocates we have behind us on the Capitol steps today. They are holding language from the Utah Compact. They have shown tremendous strength in advocacy. And now they're also showing us they have tremendous arm strength, too. So if you all want a break, that is just fine. Our final group of speakers will include Jennifer Mayer Glenn, the Director of University Neighborhood Partners. She will be followed by Jake I am kind of dizzy. Jake Fitisimasu. I did that earlier. Jake Fitisimano Jr. Jake, please accept my apologies. He represents the Utah Pacific Islander Health Coalition. We will then hear from Zeman Zhao, Director of the Mayor's Office for New Americans at Salt Lake County. Then we will hear from Byron Russell, Co-Chair of the Utah Multicultural Commission and the Multicultural Advisory Committee of Utah's COVID-19 response. Finally, we will hear from Claudia Loaiza, an emerging leader and member of the Utah Division of Multicultural Affairs.
Good afternoon. I'm Jenny Mayer Glenn, past president of the Utah Coalition of La Raza. In 1846, my ancestors came to this land that we are standing on, seeking freedom from religious persecution. It was Mexican territory and lands upon which our indigenous brothers and sisters have always resided. My ancestors worked hard, thrived, built wealth, and a Utah society that in large part supports and honors refugees and immigrants. I appreciate that in 2010 and reaffirmed in 2019, community and government leaders created and signed the Utah Compact for Immigration, calling for policies that keep families together and a federal solution to our inequitable immigration system. In 1915 and 1924, my grandparents came from Mexico, seeking a better life. It was known that there was plenty of work to do on the railroad. They also worked hard, and my father and uncle both made it through the education system and earned doctorate degrees. But for other immigrants in our country, the story has not been so bright. This is due to laws and policies and practices that have taken advantage of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. 1929, the Mexican Repatriation Act returned immigrants to Mexico. 1942, World War II, the U.S. passed a law called the Bracero Program, which brought trainloads of Mexican farm laborers to work in the fields to feed our nation. 1954, Operation Wetback. Immigrants and citizens of color were rounded up and ordered to leave the U.S. 2008, the Great Recession. Record numbers of immigrants deported by the U.S. government. 2018, thousands of immigrant children detained. You see, our economy drives how we value immigrants, particularly immigrants of color. These systems, laws, and policies have been created by those with wealth and power from which most of us benefit. This country was built by everyone, but Black, Indigenous, and people of color were not allowed by law and policy to build wealth. This Utah Compact on Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion asks us all to acknowledge and take action. Our current and historic immigration policy is exclusive and wrought with racism. This is what we must acknowledge and on which we must take action. We, Latinos and Latinas, are 14% of your Utah neighbors. I invite you to listen. As Frank Cordova, a beloved community leader, would say, listen. Please bring us to decision-making tables. Together, we can co-create knowledge, create a place of belonging and thriving for us all. Archie Archuleta dedicated his life to opening doors for me and so many others. He is one reason we are all standing here today. Let's honor him and the many others who have worked for racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. Thank you.
Good afternoon. E mua lava e mamoli atu le anganga whaafitai mo le nei avanoa whaatalo fatu. My name is Jake Fitzsimano. It's an honor to be here on behalf of the Utah Pacific Islander Health Coalition, and as one of Utah's 50,000 Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, I applaud all of those who put their hearts and their minds onto paper in drafting this compact, and we proudly support everything that is said within. In the Samoan language, we have the word fai. Fai means to say or to speak, but it also means to do. It also means action. And besides just supporting the words in the compact, I am very happy and looking forward to being able to work with all Utahns, all organizations, all businesses, and all advocates who are willing to make those words come alive, to have those words become action, become policy, become programming and funding in order to make this vision come alive. Thank you again for this opportunity. The Pacific Islanders of Utah are no strangers to disparities, especially in terms of health. It's been said by some that continuing to talk about racism, to continue to group people and label them separately is undermining what American unity is about. I respect their right to that opinion, but I respectfully disagree. If we're looking at addressing, curing, and solving diabetes and cancer and Alzheimer's disease, we don't do that by ignoring the unique, specific indicators and around those conditions. We label them, we diagnose them, we treat them individually, we find funding for intervention and research, and the same goes for our ethnic, our racial, our socioeconomic, and all other communities and identities. Ignoring them, not talking about them, not labeling these issues and bringing them to the forefront is a mistake, and I applaud our state and all of you for supporting this compact. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Zeman Sao, and I direct the Mayor Wilson's Office for New Americans. I am an Asian American, and I am an immigrant. I'm here today to affirm the intersectionalities of race, equity, inclusion, diversity, and the experiences of immigrants and refugees of color. I'll reach diversity in thoughts, identity, and faith and our immigrant experience, including the stigmatization associated with one's legal status, compounds the challenges we face in accessing equal opportunities. The color of our skin, the shape of our eyes, the accent that came out of our mouth label us as perpetual foreigners, limiting us not only to achieve our full potentials, but take away a desire to belong. I want to thank Governor Herbert and all the signers of this compact for your commitment to not just welcome, but take the action to create conditions where we, all Utahns, including immigrants and refugees, can contribute, thrive, economically, socially, culturally, and politically. Belonging is a human condition that we all craved. This compact signals that we are here together, each of us, belonging to this place we call home. Thank you.
As the Multicultural Commission co-chair, which I co-chair with Lieutenant Governor and Governor-elect Spencer Cox, it is my honor to represent the Multicultural Commission on this historic day of moving forward the Utah Compact on Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. We offer gratitude to the governor, to Governor Gary Herbert, legislative leaders, our allies, and friends who are here today who signed this compact, including Scott Anderson, Gail Miller, Mark Harrison, and the work of Natalie Gochner. They have laid the groundwork for us to join and encourage other sectors and nonprofits, faith leaders, corporate leaders, other community leaders, and hopefully the entire 3.3 million population of Utah. Today is an example of what happens when our multicultural communities have a place at the table to help design, construct, and advance good for legacy. We stand on these steps today, and again, your arm power is amazing. We stand on these steps today of the Utah State Capitol thanks to the shoulders on which we stand. The late Archie Archuleta, which was mentioned today, Pastor France Davis, Miss Janetta Williams, Miss Betty Sawyer, and others, many, many, many others. We stand on their shoulders, just to name a few. With the Utah Compact on Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, the Multicultural Commission and our entire community can find the task of grooming our youth and emerging leaders to look upon this day as closing the gap to full access to education, health, and the full pursuit of happiness. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Claudia Loiza, and I'm a proud daughter of immigrant parents and a product of the great state of Utah. I was born and raised here, received my education here, and am currently pursuing a master's degree at the University of Utah in hopes to become a city planner. As an emerging leader, I have seen the power of young voices through the urge to speak out against injustice and an expectation for action to ensure that these injustices do not persist. Young voices and emerging leaders have often been at the forefront of movements in the past and up until now. But we need to be considered, included, and provided the power to influence decisions to truly make an impact. It is our hope that we make this a practice moving forward, because when unique perspectives and lived experiences are given similar weight as we do professional experience and clout, we can address and find gaps that we may not have been able to before. Let's not underestimate the gift that is the youth voice in the fruition of this compact and future partnerships. In my role with the Utah Division of Multicultural Affairs, we operate in partnership with Nubia Pena, who is our director, and who constantly invites us and those around her to lead with head and heart. We need to build trust and empathy with each other by embracing challenging conversations that invite vulnerability and growth. But we also recognize and have heard our community say we need to go beyond discussions. The decisions we make today should share a sustainable and thriving future for generations to come, moved by truthfully confronting the past and coming together to identify justice-oriented solutions. This entails identifying and applying solutions that center the lived experiences of communities, taking on the nothing about us without us mentality. We also need solutions that are measurable. This requires seeing equity and justice practices as a movement, not a moment, as you see behind me as well. This is at the heart of the Utah Compact on racial equity, diversity, and inclusion in its pledge to advance behavior on an individual, business, and government level that will establish priorities and laws that create equal opportunity and access for all. We acknowledge the many leaders and partners to our division who have been advancing racial equity in Utah for a long time and have laid the groundwork for this compact to be received. And as Byron mentioned, they are standing behind us, and I am in awe of them constantly. And this is not so much about leveling the playing field as it is about trying to understand and give people what they need and have historically lacked to lead healthy, opportune, and balanced lives. This compact aims to promote fairness and justice by acknowledging the systemic nature of inequities that have pre-existed for decades. We have seen and continue to see the effects of what can happen when the systems that we have in place don't serve everyone equitably. And this is exactly what we're seeing right now. Being a frontline worker, living in a multi-generational home, and having underlying health conditions are all factors that put people at greater risk for contracting COVID-19. And they are circumstances that impact communities of color disproportionately. When we plan for, develop, and collaborate to create infrastructure and systems to service the most historically and systemically marginalized among us, we are ensuring the safety, well-being, and sustainability of all communities. Change happens one person at a time, and it's often during the most trying times that we see the extent and power of our conviction and resilience. We can learn from this and be better. In the words of a Mexican proverb that practically raised me, sorry, I'm trying to find it right here. They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. So this is the key takeaway today, that Utah is ready to foster anti-racist policies and actions at all levels with the understanding that this will require active listening and genuine engagement to effect meaningful, long-lasting change. In closing, in light of COVID and all that it has exposed about how we can do this work more inclusively, I want to thank all the frontline workers, including our incredible community health workers, whose efforts and sacrifices do not go unnoticed. I hope we can pause to extend gratitude, share kindness, and invite loving community in the face of adversity moving forward. Thank you.